What's up? You're listening to The Long Game, and I'm your host, David Lee Kim, co-founder of Omniscient Digital. In this episode, we chat with Patrick Despres-Gallagher. Patrick is the CEO and co-founder of Stage, a platform that empowers software businesses to launch and experiment on pricing plans instantly. Before Stage, he was an early product manager at Loom, where he helped the company scale from 1 million to 14 million users with over 30x revenue growth in less than 2 years. He also worked in product at Rapid SOS as an early stage enterprise technology investor and as a technology consultant, building and implementing software for Deloitte. This was a wide-ranging conversation. We start off talking about Stage, the product he's building, and you can check that out at heystage.com. And we talk about the complex challenge that they've decided to take on. He shares a really interesting framing of pricing and how most of us miss the complete picture about pricing and why it's often the forgotten lever in growth. There's a moment where Patrick reflects on his career and his personal journey from the life impact of losing a good friend from cancer to the jump he made to becoming a founder and CEO, and this contrast of his current reality to his upbringing. We also talk about the idea of leading with love and manifesting what you want. Now, hear me out. It sounds a little bit woo-woo and out there, but we feel like there's some truth to it. So I think you're going to learn a lot. Here's my conversation with Patrick. Patrick, welcome to The Long Game.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here.
Thanks for making time for this. Yeah, of course. So we got to connect a couple months ago, just talking about product and talking about Stage and what you're building. And you had mentioned you were one of the first product managers at Loom, now co-founder, CEO of Stage, helping product teams turn features into revenue. Very specific type of product. I haven't seen anything else like it on the market. How did you end up coming up with this idea for the product?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish we were the only one on the market. That would be great because I would be cleaning up in deals. But no, I mean well, first, again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and it's fun to talk about. We've spent the last year and a half really heads down building, and we haven't had a lot of time to talk about what got us here and why we're here. And so, so I joined Loom right before the pandemic, and they, were a smaller company at that point. They had a little bit of revenue. I think they had a pretty committed but small engaged user base, like somewhere around 1.5 million total registered users, and then we're somewhere around 400,000 monthly actives or something.
Did you say that's a small user base?
Yeah. Well, dedicated small user base, but not a high paying one, right?
Okay.
And so they had sort of and I can't share many of the numbers, but they sort of were starting to grow in terms of the number of users that they had. But then the pandemic was the thing that obviously lit it on fire. Everyone went remote immediately. Teachers and professionals were all looking for tools. And I wish I could say, I was smart, but I was really lucky. I just kind of ended up in the right place at the right time. And, 1.5 turned to the slowly 14, right? In the next 18 months, 14 million. And I think they're much higher than that now. And, a little revenue turned into a lot of revenue. And it was just a crazy ride. But during that experience and working with Joan Benet and then some of the executive team, I was always working on pricing and packaging, right? In some way, shape, or form. There was always questions about how does this impact our Chrome extension? How does this impact our, conversion? And it was just always this sort of debate that was going on and on and on. And then a few things happened. One, we made a few changes to pricing and packaging, and we saw significant revenue growth in, the seven-figure range. And that was and multiple times we saw that. But each time it took significant engineering resources. Each time it was sort of a guessing game. Each time we didn't really know what was going to happen until after we made the change. And then that risky. Yeah. And that was the start of it. But then part of it was also, I still have the message I actually had him screenshot it and send it to me. But one of the engineers who's a principal engineer at Loom now, one of their stronger engineers, and also an investor in Stage, he just pinged me out of the blue one day and was like, APIs for pricing and packaging. He's like, I'm so tired.
That was the message.
Literally, it's the message. Like, why are there not APIs? I think it's like, maybe why are there not APIs for pricing and packaging? And I had been thinking about some adjacent things around how difficult it is to launch self-serve. I was talking to another and former colleague about that. And then there was just a lot happening in the ecosystem. I had a close friend who's a pricing expert who, charges a very hefty fee to advise customers on what their pricing should be. But heard enough stories of, the Simon Kucher Partners of the world and other sort of big pricing consultants kind of basically taking these decks and spreadsheets and giving some analysis, and then the engineering team coming back and being like, this will take somewhere from 6 to 18 months. And we're not really sure if, and it's going to take many engineering resources, and we're going to have to change our whole billing system, and we're going to have to do all of these things that are complicated. And so my original reaction was, somebody should solve that problem. Like, this is a really important problem, and somebody should solve it. But it's not going to be me. And then slowly over the next probably 4 to 6 months, I continued seeing it. And it was sort of, it was like the inverse of, I think bad ideas or ideas that you shouldn't follow through on are like the ones where that you start really excited and then slowly your interest wanes. And this was sort of the opposite. I was not super excited about it. And then it sort of slowly grew. And as I started to see it everywhere. Like, it was kind of like, once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. And so that was part of it. And then previously I had worked in technology consulting, and I had worked for another startup that really had struggled early on with monetization. It was probably their biggest Achilles heel, despite having a really respected product. And I had also seen it as an investor in sort of early and growth stage tech companies, where it was just constantly this boardroom discussion of, what do we do with this? And so that's kind of how it all started. And then, there's obviously a journey from there to here. But it was just sort of seeing it and experiencing it.
It sounds like there was a certain point where you just said, I guess it just has to be me working on this.
Yeah. A couple things happened. We had launched, when I was working at Loom, one of the things I helped launch was the Loom SDK. And that was actually going to be a different monetization model than the core Loom product, right? So we're talking about more of a platform, an SDK, and API, where we would charge per video versus, Loom is this pure SaaS tool, right? And I was like, why is this so hard? Every time we want to sell something, why is it so hard, right? And so I think it just kind of kept coming back. And then a few things happened in parallel. I got reintroduced to my co-founder. So I had met him once before through a friend. And then I found out through another friend that he was actually interested in a similar idea, sort of adjacent to where we are. And he had also helped build a sort of similar part of the billing system at another startup that's done really well. And we just ended up, there's also a hallmark story of how I ended up living in Montana for 2 months, and he happened to be in Montana. And so we ended up getting together, and it was sort of this like fate, if you could call it that. Not that I really believe in it, but it just kind of, there were so many things that kind of lined up in a very strange way. I had just signed a lease in Montana while I was nomading. And then, he was there, and we ended up working on it. And we got to a definition of product that we were like, this is actually a good idea. Like, we could build this, like, it's feasible. There is a path. And at that point, we had not seen any other pricing tech in the market. I mean, this was 2021, mid 2021, and there was very little out there. 2 days after I pitched I pitched a very prominent venture firm 2 days after they invested in a much larger usage-based billing company that's sort of adjacent to what we do. And it was all, you could kind of feel it, like it was all happening at the same time. Some investors talk about like, it's problems are the one, it's like understanding what the future isn't about like predicting the future. It's about understanding the present. Right. And it just felt like this was the right time and place where, Stripe had solved payment, Adyen had solved payment. These payment gateways existed. There were some billing systems, but they were really inflexible for SaaS use cases. And that whole part of the RevOps stack that makes it possible to turn on a PLG motion or to do high velocity sales for, click, get this plan, get this add-on, charge this invoice, right? It was missing in the stack. It felt like there wasn't a really good solution. And so, that's when we sort of decided, and it was hard because I was at Loom and I love that product. Joe and Vinay are amazing founders. They're also investors in Stage and great mentors to me. And, Loom really changed. I think it's very rare that you get to work on a product that changes the way so many people work day to day. And I had only been there for just shy of 2 years. And so, I hadn't really I felt like I had more to do. But some personal things and had happened. And I just felt like it was kind of a now or never moment for me. And I took the leap.
Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe for the folks who aren't as familiar with the space, what types of work or initiatives does a technology like Stage help them do? Like why can't it be so game changing for SaaS companies?
Yeah. So I think for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with the challenges of selling software, over in the recent 5 to 10 years, companies like Stripe and ChargeBee and these sort of billing platforms, and it really started with Zora. It was the original subscription management platform, have developed to help sell software online, right? And so it really was just, how do we collect payment for software on the internet, right? And then they've sort of built billing systems and on top of that. The problem with those systems is they have to attach themselves to existing applications, and those applications are messy. They're, we want to sell this feature and that add-on, and et cetera, right? And so the way I describe it is, if Stripe and some of these billing systems are sort of the payment gateway or the payment layer, the billing layer for software businesses, we are almost like the fulfillment center. This is sort of like the way I think about it. And so it's not just about when you're doing, monetization, especially product led, but also hybrid, right? There's an element of how do we get the customers what they pay for? And that so much of that is, and how do we enforce when they don't pay? And how do we do all of this logic that sort of exists between the application and your ability to collect payment? And in that messy middle is what we found to be a pretty big opportunity. And we found people solving it numbers of ways, right? Some of them solve it by stitching together, customer data with like product analytic data, with feature flagging systems, with
lots of feature
billing system, with custom, this from your time at HubSpot, right? If you go look at HubSpot's pricing page, I look at that page and I'm like, the amount of effort, human effort, when I look at it, and of course I'm a nerd about this stuff, but the amount of human effort, the number of hours that went into making this possible is actually mind-boggling. And people don't really understand that. But if you're a product manager or a growth manager, or work in engineering, and you're responsible for billing and growth, that's a huge problem that you have to overcome. And we've heard it. Part of me validating and leaving Loom was talking to all of the big names you might imagine: Figma, Adobe, Webflow, Miro, Loom, and any of those companies you can possibly imagine, right? They all were dealing with the same thing, and they were hiring 5, 10, 15, 20 people to solve the problem. And those people were extremely frustrated in their ability to do so. And so, I think of it as essentially what we do at Stage is we help enforce what you get access to based on what you pay for. We count how much you've used, and we make sure that you pay for it appropriately. And it's sort of a very straightforward when you think about it, but the actual complexity lies beneath the surface. And the goal ultimately is to help you be able to launch pricing plans, iterate, test, experiment with them, capture more revenue over time, have more confidence in how you bill and how you price, and really partner with your customers ultimately to build the software that they think is valuable, right? Because pricing isn't saying pricing is like saying go to market, right? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
What it really is perceived value, and perceived value is a combination of positioning, product packaging, right? And a lot of other things, but the inflexibility of your software and the way you configure your product prevents you from continuing to evolve those things with how your customers want to buy. And so when we talk to our sort of primary buyers, which honestly right now have mostly been CEOs, because monetization, and there's usually a counterpart around like, the head of growth or the head of product or someone like that. CEOs and founders are the ones who ultimately have to make these decisions because they're big decisions. And part of the reason the decision is so big is because there's no incremental path to improvement. There is only, let's spend 6 months on this, hope it works, cross our fingers and see what happens, right? And you do your best, you gather data, you talk to customers, and you should do all of that still. But we sort of believe in delivering on the promise of technology, which is like, how do we just quickly and iteratively make improvements over time as our market and our product evolve?
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating to me is, and you kind of mentioned this before we chatted in some of the notes, but when I was working in an in-house growth role, we think about, hey, how do we improve conversion rates? How do we get more eyeballs on this thing? How do we make it so that it's more visible or easier to find? But all of that was just really to get people to buy the existing thing. And it wasn't until towards the end of my time at HubSpot that they started running more tests on their pricing pages, like not just placement and design, but actual pricing.
Right.
So it sounds like you're enabling people to now view pricing as one of the levers for growth that doesn't take months to make a change to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's two parts. It's automation and intelligence, right? So like, how do you automate away the work needed to get the intelligence that you need to make smarter decisions, and then use the intelligence to feed into the automation, right? So control and insight is another way we talk about it. I've always said that, pricing is the forgotten fourth pillar of marketing, right? Of go-to-market. So there's product, promotion, placement, and pricing, right? And so product, tons of tools to help build products, right? Name all of you can name all of them, right? Promotion, being able to market, sell your product. Placement is really about sales, is how I think about it in a software context. But then there wasn't anything around pricing, really. I think there were some early gains from companies like Optimizely that would help you with just the pricing page, right? And they would actually help you, sort of run A/B tests and experiments. But the problem is when it comes to pricing, you have to follow through on that promise, right? So you have to be able to then give the customer the features you said you were going to give them give to them at the price you said you were going to give it to them as quickly as you said you would do it. And all of those things require engineering effort, right? And it's sort of this, people don't really realize the complexity underneath the hood. And so we really wanted to build a stack and a platform, and we're really taking an aggressive bet in the way we're building the product, because we believe from this place of product configuration, there is a $10 billion and $100 billion business about what Stage looks like, to really be a modern sales platform, part of sales infrastructure. And from that place of product configuration, you actually unlock a lot of potential things that you otherwise cannot do without that flexibility. And so we're really excited about sort of what our short-term vision is, in the immediate term, of just like, how do we help companies improve and launch pricing, close sales faster, and use our tool to do so, and to measure and to actually continue to evolve. But then the long tail of opportunity there is also really interesting to us in the way software is sold.
How do you think about, so there's a lot going on in a growth place, right? Or growth industry. Like there's a lot of product-led sales platforms coming out now. And I have attempted to bring in one of those tools. And I think the objection that I heard, that I've learned a lot of people often hear, is we can just build that ourselves. And I imagine some of the logos you mentioned earlier, Miro, Figma, they are pretty big companies. Wouldn't they just hire a team of engineers to build and have something that they own rather than use a third party for that? So maybe this is like the objection. Like how do you usually sell against that or speak to that?
Build versus buy is a big one. And I know a lot of the founders from the PLS, product-led sales platforms, and I very much respect and admire what they're trying to build, because we ran into the same issues with our sales teams being able to get signals out of the product to figure out where to take action. I think the difference in my mind is we're not just a data tool, right? We are an actual platform, right? And so we give you sort of superpowers and things that you can do that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. We've run into the build versus buy conversation with a few of the companies that I mentioned, and I won't get into specifics. We're actually in some deals with them actively. And they have the same conversation. One example I got was, someone quoted me, it's going to take us approximately 4 engineers and about $1.5 million to build the basic version of the system that you've currently built, right? Just like the core part of it for our use case, right?
That was them telling you, like, if we wanted to build this in-house, that's how much it would cost us.
This is how much it would cost us. And I can confirm, because I have a pretty well-staffed engineering team that's working on this, and they are all extremely senior and competent and fast. Where the real value starts to come in is not in the year 1 of features, it's in year 2, year 3, and year 4. It's the long tail, right? For example, things that we will be able to do that most people wouldn't think to be able to do, right? So when you're creating limits inside of your pricing, like you can get 20 widgets for this price. Really smart companies like Zoom have done things where when you approach the 90th percentile of your usage limit, they send you an email and they're like, hey, it would be nice for you to think about upgrading. And then you hit your limit. They actually have soft limits, right? Soft and hard limits, right? You hit your limit. Hey, you hit your limit. Like, we're not going to remove access, but it's really time for you to think about upgrading. Then you get to the next, you're a few over, right? Okay, now you're abusing it. You're abusing our goodwill. We're actually going to cut you off, right? And you can't keep doing cloud storage recording, right? This is, I'm admitting to you an experience I've had recently. So that amount of effort, the amount of engineering effort that goes into building something like that, most of our customers, when they think about what they have to build, it's like, oh, we just need to build this sort of configurable provisioning system, and like, it's just going to be super easy. And then,
it's not that easy.
It's not that easy, and that, right? And so we've already had multiple companies boomerang back to us and say, yeah, as it turns out, we still have lots of questions. We still have to spend tons of engineering resources on this, and it's really not core to our success. And you all have both the platform and the platform services. So we do offer part of the platform you get with us is being able to talk to us and get data inside of the tool around, is this working? Is this effective? Are you leaving value on the table? Is there opportunity? And what types of, we call them plays on stage, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Are there plays you can be running using our software and our platform to continue to drive not just conversion, right? Because conversion is one part of it, but monetization is there's 3 components to it, right? It's conversion, retention, and expansion / hopefully expansion, not contraction, right? And so the goal is, when you're making these decisions, how do you make sure that you're taking all 3 of those things into account? And our goal is to really help companies understand that better.
One of the things I see very long-term, maybe not very long-term, I don't know where y'all are at with this thinking, or maybe you're already starting to build it, but as you get more companies on a platform, you can start gathering data on seeing what works for different companies and aggregating that and making recommendations on how people can improve their pricing even.
Yeah, there's a diagnostic component to it, which I think we want to be able to get there, right? I think it's foolish to say we'll be there in the next year. I think the realistic time horizon, we can do it by talking to us, right, and looking at data. But a lot of those recommendations are so business specific. And so the way we think about it is, how can we empower a growth team or a product team, or even executives in an organization, to get that intelligence and then use the automation to make smaller changes, make incremental improvements, run tests, and then get better intelligence back to inform decision making, right? And then continually sort of view it as this, just like we would any other part of go-to-market. It's a continuous process of refinement and improvement over time. You're never going to get it right on the first time. There's no such thing as a right price. I say this to everyone. There is no such thing as the right price, right? Like your price, your market changes, your product changes, your competitor rate, everything changes. What there is a wrong price. So there definitely are worse things you can be doing. And so the goal is to really bring that and build that expertise into the product. Someday, I would like to, get to a place where we are being more diagnostic around it in an automated fashion. I think the first place to start is, can we make our data model, our APIs, our UI, and the experience clean enough, simple enough, easy enough to use that any growth person could come in, or any product person could come in, or any salesperson eventually, which is a sort of an adjacent area that we will be going into, to give them the ability to make good decisions, drive conversion, renewal, and expansion. And so if we can get there, I think the sky's the limit in terms of, okay, what's that next layer? If you've ever seen A Clockwork Orange, is turn it up to 11, like where, and Brian Chesky talks about this, like what's the 11 experience for Airbnb? Yeah. Like I think getting into that diagnostic space using things like artificial intelligence, which is of course a buzzword. I think Bayesian statistics is probably enough in most cases, but being able to use some level of intelligence and insight to get you real and meaningful answers, and then automate some of those answers, right? So how do we actually just automate away some of this pain? So that's what we're getting excited about.
You mentioned that there's no right price, but there is a wrong price. Besides the obvious, you're undercharging. What is the wrong price?
Yeah. So one of my mentors describes, when you think about what pricing is, and this is getting a little nerdy for a second, but what you're describing is the price level, right? So when most people think about price, they think about, here's the sticker price, right? The price level, he and I would both argue, and we debate about this a lot, but we actually both sort of share this, is it's actually the least important part of pricing. So a lot of the in order price metric, price structure, and price level. Price metric is the thing you charge per. Price structure is how you charge, when you charge, the type of pricing model that you sort of, whether it's good, better, best, or a la carte, or, platform. There's different ways of charging and when. And then the level is the sort of the dollar amount that everyone's used to. The level is a lagging indicator. It's a lagging indicator of a lot of things: how you position your product, what market you're going after, what features are in what packages, right? It's more of the tail, not the dog. And so when we see people making mistakes, we see them doing things like having multiple value metrics or an incorrect value metric. And you're seeing a lot of this in SaaS right now. A lot of the debate around per seat pricing versus usage pricing versus some hybrid of the two versus metered billing, right? It's really a debate about what value metric makes the most sense for the business. And that's going to be business dependent. And so one of the ways in which we sort of differ in our view, and Kyle Poyer, who's at OpenView, put out an amazing report recently, I think it was earlier this week or late last week, on the usage-based billing market and just sort of generally where things are headed. He describes what I believe very deeply based on my experience at Loom, which is the sort of hybrid world of pricing is the one that's actually starting to take over. So it's not a world of pure metered billing. It's not a world of pure per seat billing. It's a world in which you have a conversation with your customers and they tell you this is how we want to buy. And then you have to figure out how to architect your software around that, right? And so I think that's one of the biggest ones is metric. The other biggest mistake that I think we see people make is it's related to structure, but it's a little bit more straightforward, which is pricing is really just segmentation in disguise. And so when you think about your plans, what you're thinking about is, I'm selling this plan, right, at this price to a specific type of buyer, right? And when you're thinking about, the economics, the demand curves, right? You're trying to hit different buyers at different price points, as well as different quantities, right? Different packages, right? What are we actually selling them? And the goal is to really optimize and maximize the area under the curve. And the best way to do that is to really know your segments, right? And so when you're thinking about packaging, we often see companies, oh, well, this other company did a good, better, best model. But it's like, well, does that make sense for your business, right? Would it make more sense, for example, to have a package targeted at product marketers and a package targeted at executives and a package targeted at, I don't know. But if you're not asking those questions, you are undoubtedly leaving value on the table, undoubtedly. And so those are the most common issues we see.
Interesting. So this is something new to me. I have not heard of. I'm not a pricing and packaging person, so a lot of this is very new. So the price metric is, what is the unit that you are charging for? Is it a seat? Is it usage based? Right. For price structure, what you typically see is good, better, best, cheap, mid option, high expensive option with more features as you go. It sounds like you're saying there are other ways to look at it, by role. Salesperson gets more value, they should probably pay more. Marketer gets less value, maybe pay less. And then the price level is what a lot of us are fixated on, which is the actual dollar amount. Did I read that back correctly?
That's 100% right. And just to give you some examples, if you want to look at different companies, right? So in the Loom use case or the Figma use case, which is sort of the classic PLG, even in HubSpot's use case, it's a lot of good, better, best pricing. But what is also baked into other use cases. So, for example, Intercom has, sort of famously gone through some big changes and had some struggles with their
pricing is kind of hard to understand.
Yeah, and they know that, and it's an amazing team over there, and I think they've really started to figure it out. But if you go look at their new pricing models, they're really developed around segments. So if you actually go and look, they say it's for customer success or whatever the specific segments are. And so they've really shifted to more of a it's not good, better, best. It's here's one segment of the product, you can buy another segment and another segment. The way you also see this is with tools like CRMs, right? So you have, not only do you have sort of the good, better, best, but you actually have multi-product, right? So you have for marketing, for sales, for IT, there's different buyer personas. And so you see often mixes of the two. Even with sort of open source, within we call it, platform PaaS companies, per API call, per MAU, what you often see is a pure usage model on top of some level of feature differentiation by plan, right? And those feature differentiation is usually targeted by segment, right? So for example, you see SSO and SCIM in the enterprise plan because enterprises care and are willing to pay what it costs to make sure that it's secure. Now there's a really wonderful debate about SSO in that I won't get into now. It's a little too deep, but what you want to do is you want to enable different forms of pricing model, right? And you want to sort of serve that model up to software businesses in a way that they can make the appropriate evolutions over time. And that's hard to do. It's very hard.
So I'm going to pivot this conversation a little bit. And I wanted to ask you, you're a first-time founder. What has it been like making that transition to being the founder and owner of a business from working in-house?
Yeah. So to kind of back up, I grew up in Massachusetts. I come from, I was a first gen college student. I don't come from a family with a ton of means. I'd gone to grad school. I'd done, some professional things in consulting and investing. And, I always thought I wanted to found something, but I also knew that founding something to found something is a mistake, because it won't carry you through the roller coaster ride that is starting a company. And so I had sort of gotten to this point where I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to do this. And I lost a close personal friend of mine, had passed away during the pandemic, not from COVID, but from cancer. And a couple of life things like that had happened where I just had to sit down and look back and, look back and say, like, what if I'm myself at 70 years old or 80 years old, the sort of, deathbed test of like, if I'm looking back, will I regret not having done it? And the answer was definitely yes. And so then I sort of opened my aperture to, okay, what is something I really can get excited about and chase down? And I was making the decision to leave Loom, and I was making a lot of decisions, like, leave a lot of equity on the table and other things. And I remember just sort of, I was actually in Montana with my partner, and I was just shaking when I had decided, and I was about to go in to have the conversation. I was just like, this is really, like, it's scary, right? It's a scary thing.
Yeah.
Everything since that moment has exceeded my wildest imagination in terms of, yeah, it's as hard as everyone says, right? And in some ways it's sort of like ironic because it's harder, but you don't really, it's just kind of like, just go do it. Like, it's the only way you're going to feel it. It's the only way you're going to know it. I mean, you started a business, like you get this. I think part of it has been the greatest joy because I just show up and I get to really help shape the culture with my co-founder, who's amazing. And we get to kind of build the company we want to build. But it's also a roller coaster ride. And I think there are two ways you can take a roller coaster ride. There's the way where you've got your hands up in the air and you're like, woo, like, this is insane, but like, I'm having fun, right? And then there's the other one where you're gripping on, and we've just decided, like, we want to ride it like we're having a blast, because life doesn't last forever. And we want to bring a lot of love to our customers and to the customers we serve, to the employees we're responsible for, and who put their trust in us, to the investors who do the same. And so, like, it's just a mindset shift of, hey, this is really hard and it's awesome because it's really hard. Right. And so it's been great. There have been sleepless nights, tears, all-nighters, like, all of the things you can imagine that have happened, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And I would encourage those who are thinking about doing it to just do it. Pick something that's meaningful to you, pick a problem, don't pick an idea. But yeah, if you're excited about it, I think it's a real gift to be able to do it. And I feel blessed even on the days when it sucks. And there are many of those days.
I love it. And you said something that was very interesting. I had just had Gaurav Vora, who is head of growth at Superhuman, on the pod a couple of weeks ago. And you said you wanted to show a lot of love to, like, your customers and your team and all of that. And one of the things that he had brought up on the pod that we kind of poked a little fun at, but he was just like, yeah, we just want to show customers that we love them, we care about them. He was like, yeah, it's like love-led growth or something like that. I was like, yeah, we should make that a thing. How do we just treat everyone with love, and just the growth comes, and all the business growth will come from that. But I want
thinking about that. That's really powerful. I would love to meet him.
Yeah, I'll shoot you guys an intro. You mentioned something in passing just now. You didn't come from a background of many means. I read that your parents didn't finish high school. They got their GED though, and then I'm curious what the conversations with them have been like as they've seen you grow in your career. Like, you went to Johns Hopkins, you went to Stanford Business School. You're kind of the American dream, I imagine. Like,
yeah.
What was it like for them? Like, I don't know if you talked to them about this, but like, for them to see you kind of making these moves.
Yeah, no, I think like they don't connect with it in the same way you and I do, or folks who sort of live in this world. And there's something really wonderful about it, because there's also like their response is just love, right? Like, mm-hmm. I'm just their son, and like, they see me doing great things and they're proud of me. But most importantly, they just see me as happy and fulfilled and chasing things that, I'll never forget when I told my dad I was quitting my job to go start a company. The first text message I got back was, "That's courageous." And what can I do to support you? And they don't need to know the details, right? Like it doesn't matter to them, right? What matters to them is, and it comes back to, the love thing, right? It's like, they just love me and they want to see me succeed. And I think that that's the most important thing. In some ways, it also gives me amazing perspective, because there'll be days where I'm like, we're trying to figure out this, SDK, and it's not the auto generation of the docs isn't working. And, our customer's mad at us because, we returned the wrong price onto their pricing page. And like, there's just, all these like minutia of details, but they matter a lot to our customers, and therefore they matter a lot to me. And so I get worked up about them. But when you sort of zoom out and you take the perspective of like, I am living the dream, and like, it is, I absolutely, no matter, like, I've already succeeded beyond my wildest imagination. That doesn't mean I'm anywhere close to done. And I don't have that life force that sort of drives me forward of this sort of balance of gratitude and ambition. Right. And it's a tricky balance. But like,
I feel you.
For me, I've got nothing to lose. I have literally nothing to lose. Right. And if I were my competitor, that would be the thing I would actually be most worried about in competing against me, because like, I don't have anything to lose, and I will put it all out there, and I just won't care, because I've already got everything I ever need. Right. And so in that sense, I just feel so lucky to be here, and I feel lucky that they support me, and they sort of are curious, and they're like, this is super cool. Like, who even knew this was like a thing or an industry, right? My dad worked in construction his whole life. I did that for 4 years in high school. Like, it's just like such a different world, right? It's a blessing, truly.
Yeah, I love that. I have a similar sentiment about where I am, where we are in life in general. Like, my parents, they were refugees. They managed to live through a genocide and get to the States and raise a family. Like, that in itself is, 1 in a million chance that could have happened. And so when I think about whenever I'm in a down mood or how it's so tough to build a business or whatever, I'm like, I am so lucky to have these problems to begin with. I could have
exactly
far more worse life circumstances. So it puts a lot of things in perspective, and in like, I should be having fun, because my parents have tried to start businesses and they didn't work out. That is a reality, right? And they see me and they're like, wow, David's making this work, and he gets to meet these other entrepreneurs who are making it work. So in a way, I get to benefit from a lot of some of their challenges. So perspective helps a lot when we're building.
Yeah. And I think it carries you through in a way that gives you the energy you need, right? I think people always talk about time management, and I'm so less worried about time management than I am about energy management. Like, I'm a human being. I have, only so much energy I can give in a day. And I try to do everything I can, from exercising to, journaling to meditating, to like give myself that energy. But some days it's not there, right? It's like, there are days where that happens. Luckily it's far fewer days than not, but like, it happens. And you have to have some pilot light burning inside. I think a lot of people, and it's such a great story you tell about your parents, and it's so great to respect what they did and what they went through to get there. And I think a lot of us have similar respect and admiration, but that pilot light has to be there. And hopefully, I think for some people, that light comes from a place of like, insecurity or like fear, like I'm more, like I need more money, or I need a better role or a better title. And I feel like that light burns out a lot faster. And it's often not there when you need it. Whereas if you can find it from that place of gratitude, from that place of joy, and like from having fun, like this is supposed to be fun. Like talking to you is fun, right? Getting to know you is fun. And what you all are building. And so like, if you, that light is sort of, the one that I find to be the most important to both cherish and flame, the flame, what's the phrase I'm looking for here? Fan the flame. Yeah.
Fan the flame. You mentioned something interesting, the idea about how many of us intentionally or not, probably not likely to be intentional, tend to be fueled or motivated by more fear-based emotions. And that was something that I had recognized in myself just in the last year or two, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I started saying this phrase to myself that's kind of caught on with a group of friends. It's like faith, not fear, where instead of thinking about all the things that could go wrong and thinking about how to avoid those things that could go wrong, let's focus on what could go right and get excited about that. So when you said your dad texted you back saying, that's courageous, there's a part of me that says, wait, it's actually not courageous. It's very obvious. And this is going to work out. So it's just the only option to me, because if it's going to work out, I know it will. I just have to pursue it. So that's been a huge shift in mindset, at least for me. It's very timely that you brought that up. The flame is definitely burning much brighter once I've shifted that.
Yeah. No, and I think I'm similar, it's when you come, I think there's a transcendence of when you come from, a background in which it's not obvious that you're going to have good outcomes, right? And there's a lot of struggle and a lot of adversity. I think when you can get to a certain point of that, where you move away from the survival mindset, which is so based in that nervous system reaction of like fight or flight, right? Like if I don't hit 2 million in ARR, I'm never going to raise my, and and then you can feel your body just like seize up, right? And you react, your team ingests it, right? Like they see you reacting negatively in meetings. Like it carries into everything that you do, your partnerships, your friendships. And so if you can find that place of like, wow, what an amazing opportunity. And like, obviously it's going to work out. And maybe, I think some people have described it. It's like, there's a bit of like short-term pessimism, long-term optimism, right? It's like, you want to be very diligent in the moment, right? You want to be aware of things that are going on. You want to be detail oriented. You want to pay attention. You want to notice things, right? And you want to solve problems. But like in that sort of short-term, like, paying attention, being on top of it, doing your job, executing, you also have to hold that long-term optimism of like, it's going to work out. Right. And, it's funny because you start to see these really smart people connect metaphors in different ways. Right. And Steve Jobs, it took me so long to understand why I loved that speech he gave at Stanford, the Stanford graduation, but like, you can't connect the dots looking forward. Right. It's such a beautiful, you can only connect them looking back. And so what you described around faith, my coach and I actually talk about this a lot, where there's that scene. I don't know if you've ever seen Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, but it's like, you have to just take the step, right? Like you have to step into the emptiness and hope that, the bridge is there and know that it will be, kind of, right? Like it's almost like quantum physics. It's like in believing that it's there, it is there. Right. And so it's something that I think about a lot. And I think it's not easy to hold that, right? Like we talk about it, like it's easy to hold that. There are days where it's hard, right, to really hold that belief. But if you can, it's hard to bet against that. It's really hard to bet against.
Yeah. Yeah. We might be starting to lose some listeners, but because I'm about to get into some woo-woo stuff, but some of the things you're saying about taking a step and hope that the bridge is there and knowing that it will be there. It reminds me of what started off as a joke with my business partners, but we were like, wait, there might be something here. We were just like, let's just manifest more. And like, as we talk about certain things, we would be talking about a prospect and be like, yeah, did you hear back from them? I don't know. And then a minute later, they email us back. Just so small things. That's a very particular example. Or we started saying this faith, not fear thing. And we walk around and we see graffiti that literally says faith, not fear. And I'm like, what are the chances that, I don't know, maybe we're just more attuned to what's going on in the world. But the joke is, let's just keep manifesting what we want and the world's going to respond. So I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it works out. What I will say about what you all are doing and what excites me, it's the same reason I reached out cold, right? Like I think I reached out to you all cold, and that's how this all happened. And I just saw the value that you all were trying to offer to the world. And I was like, I really need this. Like, I so desperately need what it is that you all are doing. And I also just share this belief that, the world of software and like what we're doing and the way people buy is changing. And a lot of that change is about leading with value up front and leading with information and helping people be successful in their role. And then on the backside of that, yeah, they're going to buy something from you because they need that thing to be successful, right? And so much about content is bringing that point of view. It's about manifesting in the world that point of view and letting people who resonate with that come to you, right? And like be part of your journey. And I think, and that's the part of the customer love where we're working with some customers right now, where it's like, we help somebody go from 0 to product-led growth in a week and a half, right? 2 weeks. And like, yeah, it's crazy, right?
That's
like
crazy.
I mean, they're working on demand gen to get funnel and all that, but like we were taking payment through Stripe with like corresponding plans, features, everything was happening. And they were just like, this is not real, right? And we're like, yes, it's real. Like, just believe with us, right? Like, believe, like we can do that. It's not rocket science. Like, I'm not putting people on Mars. Thank you, Elon. Right. But yeah, anyways, manifesting is a great word for it. Faith, not fear. I'll carry that one with me.
Yeah. You mentioned something in passing just now too. You said you don't worry about time management. You worry more about energy management. What does that look like and what gives you energy?
Yeah. The immediate word that pops into my mind is learning. I just love learning. Part of being a founder that's amazing is I get to learn. When I've been unhappiest in my career or in my life has been where I felt my learning was curtailed intentionally relative to, because I had to get some economic outcome of productivity done, right? And so I had to be put into a space where I was forced to, this is the thing that you're doing. And like, you can't think outside of that box. And I always rebel against that. I just my energy is all around how do I learn so I can be a more effective person in everything that I do. And I think one of the things, and I manifest this in my team, I'm like, just because you're a product designer doesn't mean you can't learn front-end development and product. Like, I will give you whatever resource you're interested in learning there, because I know somehow your output's still going to be the same. It's like one of those things where the thing you're supposed to work on, you'll still end up getting it done, and you'll be happier doing it, because human beings we don't think in narrow tunnel vision. Our thoughts wander and we're curious and we want to understand the world. And so for me, learning is the big thing. And so and I do this, the way I manifest this in my life is every year I pick something new I need to learn. So right now I'm taking a DJ class, which is great. I love music. I grew up playing music. And the other thing, like last year was boxing. I pick something every year, and sometimes I keep doing it. Sometimes I don't. But the sort of going back to being an amateur to just going back to like, I don't know, and keeping that beginner mindset of like that to me. And that's one of the greatest parts about being a founder. It's like literally every day there is something I am the worst in the world at that I need to become at least competent at, right? in order to be successful. And so, learning for me is the thing, and managing that energy, and then taking care of myself. So I have a routine. As a founder, I'm like, I have an hour and a half, 2 hours a day to myself at most, right? At most. And so, because I have other people in my life and relationships and family, et cetera. And so I try to carve out at least an hour to 2 hours every day for my routine, which is try to exercise, do something physical, try to write something down, and try to meditate. And those are the three things that really, like, if I can get those done on any given day, I can work for 14, 16, 18 hours and like make things happen. And my energy stays relatively high, even late into the day. If I don't do those things by 7 o'clock, I'm like, I can't look at a computer screen anymore. It's just it's both physiological and mental, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That routine you mentioned of exercise, writing, meditating, when does that happen? Is it the first thing in the morning?
Yeah, I'm a morning person. Recently, I've become a late evening person and a morning person. Sleep is important. I definitely try to get 7 to 8 hours every night. Last night was not as successful. I was a little worried coming in today. I was like, oh man, I'm pretty tired. but it's really trying to get it done first thing in the morning, because once the day takes over, once you open that inbox, once other people's problems become your problem, once you try to show your customers love, I just can't get off of it. Like, it's so hard for me to pull myself back out of that momentum and into, now I need to go to the gym and like write about something. And like, it's just too hard. So I try to start the day with my own thoughts, my own meditation, my own reflections, my own physical activity. And through that, I set myself up for better success for the rest of the day.
I do the opposite, where I like to bookend my day. So I'll be laptop closed, out the door to go to the gym by 5:30, 6 at the latest, spend an hour and a half or 2 hours at the gym, maybe listen to a podcast and like really put in some sweat, and then come back and have dinner, maybe go on my laptop, but usually I try to just shut down. And then in the morning, I realized I used to work out in the morning, but my mind's very fresh and it's already starting to go. So I've actually decided, hey, let's move my workouts to the evenings and use my brain power in the mornings and like get to that tired state and re-energize myself with the workout. So it's interesting to hear how you structured it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I've done both at different phases. At this phase, it's the problem, one of the challenges. And there are just times where I'm getting an email from a customer or an investor, and it's like, I'm not allowed to turn off right now. By contractually not allowed to turn off. And so trying to do it first thing is good. And also surrounding myself with people who can help pick up space when I'm not around, right? And who give me the space to do those things is really important.
Yeah. So you said each year you pick a new skill to learn. DJing is the thing this year. Is this learning from scratch? Like, you've never touched vinyl or anything beforehand, and you're just getting a DJ set or going to a class and learning?
Yeah, it depends on the activity. Some of them are from scratch. So boxing, I had never put on a pair of boxing gloves before. Okay. With DJing, it was a little bit different because I actually helped build a recording studio. It's my dad's retirement project. Cool. And it's a full-fledged full grade recording studio, like full soundproofing. The room was redesigned and rebuilt from scratch.
When's the album coming out?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually something an important part. He's a very good singer and songwriter, and so I'm trying to get him to record his own music. He mostly likes recording other people's music, but that's something that's going to be important for me and for my kids. But I had a lot of experience with sound engineering and music theory. I played guitar, bass, piano a little bit guitar for 20 something years at this point. And so the music piece of it, I knew, but the DJing piece I knew nothing about. Right. So I know nothing about, controllers and, beat matching. I kind of get, but there's a whole world and underground associated with it. And I love electronic music and I love all types of music. And so for me, it was just this thing that I was so curious about, because there's so much you can do with technology now that I can't do with my guitar in a band. Like, I've played in bands my entire life, and there's just so much more that the tech offers you in terms of sound and things. And so I got really interested in it. But yeah, it starts on both ends. I mean, sailing, I'd been a couple times, but nothing serious. And I went from that to being able to captain a boat under the Golden Gate Bridge by myself. Right. Like that was very
awesome.
The skiing, I'd been a couple times, but I had not really. So I learned when, living in California, it's a big thing. So just different starting points.
I love it. I'm going to a salsa class this evening with my girlfriend. So we've been taking classes on and off. I'd say we're still pretty beginner, but also trying to live that beginner's mind out.
And I do it at work too. I'm learning outbound sales for the first time, right? I'm using all the tools. I'm doing all of the, it's just, because I eventually need to be able to bring someone in who can do that. And I won't know how to guide them if I haven't, been part of it. Right. And so it happens every day at work as well. So yeah.
I love it. So I know we're coming up on time. We have some closing questions here, so we can jump straight into those.
Yeah.
What's one opinion you have about business that you think people would disagree with?
So it's funny because we kind of got into it already, and this was actually my answer. I had been thinking about, because you kind of given me some thoughts around what the questions would be, and I'd been thinking about it, and it was a hard one for me because I actually am pretty antagonistic when it comes to all things business. Like, I'm mostly just like, I just want to press people to see where their buttons are, like, where the sacred cows are. And there's a lot of them. I went to Stanford Business School. It's full of sacred cows, and many of which I don't agree with. I think this one comes from my mentor. And it's funny, we've talked about love in this conversation enough times, but one of my mentors, Lars Dahlgaard, who founded a company called Success Factors. There's a long story of how we got introduced, and it's also another sort of hallmark manifestation of destiny kind of thing. But he wanted to, when I was working for him, he wanted to name his sort of family office, and we were talking about raising a venture fund. He wanted to name it Love Ventures. And I was so insecure about it. I was like, I don't know. It was LLUV, not LOV. Like, what is the Southwest Airlines? Like, I don't know. I was so insecure about it. And I've talked to him about this since. And he was really the first person who was like, so much of this is about bringing love to the people you work with. And that doesn't mean, right? I think when people hear that, they think like, soft, overly kind, not direct, right? It's like, no, like sometimes the loving thing to do is to fire someone, right? To liberate them, because they actually don't enjoy the job that they're doing, and they're not good at it because they don't care about it. They're just doing it because they have to. And that's liberation and freedom for everyone. And in some ways it's a loving act, right? Like, and so what I think what he was really trying to get to at the heart of it is like that full sense of alignment. And like businesses and caring about people, like there's sort of this belief that there's this like capitalistic system, and I am a cold-blooded capitalist. Like, I definitely am, but I'm also a caring human being, right? And I think those two things have to intersect for successful businesses to exist, for really big and meaningful businesses to exist. You have to actually care about people you work with, you work beside, the customers you serve. You have to care very deeply. And there's this sort of gentle, loving kindness that exists. And I don't think you can build meaningful businesses without that. Now, some might say, there's tough love and like, normal love, but like there are, I think they have to exist no matter what together.
I love that. I remember the CTO at HubSpot, Dharmesh, he would call himself a warm-blooded capitalist. Very warm and fuzzy, loves people, but also got to make money.
Yeah, exactly. Warm-blooded capitalist is a good one. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And maybe this is related, but what's one impactful piece of advice you've been given?
So this one is, I was funny because I really don't believe in giving advice. So I just think advice is my experience projected onto the world in a way that's probably not relevant for most people. What I've found over time is there are guidelines that are more helpful, ways of sort of framing things that are more helpful than not. And I've found them because smart people in different ways across, it's through triangulation. It's like, wow, this smart person said this, and then this really smart person said this. Those two people have nothing to do with each other and don't know anything, but they're sort of honing in on the same truth, right? And the one that I think is really important is this sort of take the long view, which again, like it's funny because it's the name of the podcast. But it's that sort of deathbed test, right? And it's not even deathbed. It's 20 years, 30 years from now. All hard decisions, and this is something I've worked with my coach on a lot, all hard decisions don't have a right answer by definition, right? And so they're hard because they're hard. And like, you're not going to know the outcome of the choice in what you do until after you've made the decision and you get some, detail, and you'll do everything you can to analyze it. The only way to really live your life is to live for the person you want to be 30 years from now, looking back, right? So how did I make that decision? Who was I in that moment, right? And so when it comes to all things personnel, all things my life, all things how I spend my time and my choices, I'm trying to make the 60-year-old version of myself proud, right? I want that person to be able to look back and say, I'm maybe the decision didn't work out, but it came from a place of Patrickness. Like it came from a place of like, this is good and it's well intentioned and it's well thought out. And it's done in a way that aligns with who I am as a person and how I want to live my life. And so I think it's really that long view on decision making where there's no right answer, right? And there are probably 5 or 6 very important decisions people will make in their life: where they go to school, who they marry, who they partner with, whether they partner with some, like there's a certain number of decisions that really will be big. Me starting a company and becoming an entrepreneur is one, right? And who knows whether that will be a good decision or a bad decision, but I have to know that version of myself would be proud of the choice I made.
I love all of that. I think the thing you mentioned about, hey, these 2 separate people that I've never met in different parts of my life said the same thing, and they're very, like, I admire them. They're very smart. There's something here. Like, even if it sounds super woo-woo, something, I don't know, I just got to trust it because they've lived longer and they've seen more shit than I have.
There's Rick Rubin put out a book recently. He's been on all sorts of podcasts. Yeah. It's called The Creative Act. And I love his definition of creativity, which is this sort of idea of noticing, right? Like you notice, you notice something, like it's beauty, like in a play, like somebody playing a great piece of music. Like there's just something about noticing. And what I found, part of the wisdom I think I've gained over time is like, people are smart in different ways. And I know people who are never went to college and barely graduated high school who have their own level of brilliance in their own way, and people who did, right? Like not in societal standards. But what's interesting is when they start noticing things that seem true to them in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can kind of find that and then put your own spin on it, apply, add your own context and your own sort of experience, but there's usually something very universal and unifying about it. And for me, that one has been the sort of imagine yourself and look back and like, how do you want to be? How do you, if the decision doesn't matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes focused on it, right? Like it's those types of things where, spend more time on the very small percentage of bigger critical decisions that matter, and spend less time worrying about, the small ones where, who knows what's going to happen. It's not worth spending a lot of time thinking about. Like action is better than inaction, learn through action. Right. Yeah.
Awesome. What is one book that you would recommend more people read? I don't know if it's the Rick Rubin book or you got another one in mind.
No, it's funny because like this one's sort of like it's a bit like the advice, but different. It's kind of like, what are you looking for? Like where's your curiosity bringing you? So I'll give you kind of 2. One is a memoir, and then one is more just like, unleash your brain. So one book that I really love is Born Standing Up, which is a book by Steve Martin about his career and sort of the formation of stand-up comedy, like a form of entertainment that really didn't exist when he started. And it's funny, and it really gets into creativity. It really gets into persistence. It really gets into process. He and Jerry Seinfeld sort of share this similar belief around it's just doing the work and showing up and being and manifesting and repeating. But the stories are just so human and relatable. And it kind of makes you believe that like you could manifest anything, like you could actually manifest an entire genre of entertainment. Right. And so that's a great book. I super recommend it. It's more on the nonfiction side. On the fiction side, Project Hail Mary, which is one that I think a lot of folks have recommended recently. Andy Weir.
That one. Is that a sci-fi?
Yeah, it's a sci-fi book. And I don't love sci-fi. I mean, I like sci-fi. It's not like a genre that I enjoy a lot of. But what's so amazing about that book is just the character development and the storytelling and the specificity and the imagination. And it truly is like, I listened to that book. It was a 16-hour audiobook. And I'm not a big like 6Xer or whatever. Like I don't listen, maybe it was like 1.4 or something. I listened to it in 2 days. Like I just like couldn't stop listening. It was over a weekend, and it's just really, I think what's so magical about it is he humanizes people in a way that shows the character development is just amazing. I mean, like anyone who writes stories will tell you like characters are the thing that makes stories real, right? And so he just does an amazing job with it. So those are my two.
I love it. I was previously on a hunt for fiction books, and since I put that into the world, I got a huge backlog of recommendations. This one, so I do this thing with book recommendations where I hear it once, I'm like, maybe I'll write it down somewhere.
The same thing.
I hear it a couple times, and I'm like, okay, 2 different people, and then like, 3 or 4 different people have recommended this. Okay, there's probably move it up my backlog. And
I think that's a good way of prioritizing your time. You know, somebody once said to me, it's like, you know, if you do the math, it's like if you read a book a week, you could only read something like 2,500 to 3,000 books in your life. And so I am definitely a big believer in like, pick, like choose. If you don't like it, toss it immediately, right? Because like we only have so much time, right? And so it's good to focus and find signals in the ether that tell you this is where I should be spending my time.
100%. Yeah, life is fleeting. Gotta enjoy it, not force ourselves to read a book we don't want to read.
Yeah. Why are we? Yeah. This is another thing that Lars would say is like, if you really don't like it, stop doing it. Like just like, I know it's like crazy advice and that's a bit of a privileged position because like some people can't are trying to figure out how to, but it's like the goal should be to figure out how to stop doing it. Right. Like no matter what, even if it takes a few years or, but like stop doing it. Yeah.
That was much needed. I'll call it guidance, not advice. That was much needed guidance. I need very timely. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That being said, last question here is, where can people find you on the internet?
On the internet, they can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. You'll find me around as my website. My personal website is pdg.is, haystage.com for Stage Technologies Incorporated. We are getting ready to do a big public beta launch around the last week of February, first week of March. We're still setting the exact date, so look out for us on the interwebs. We'll be putting out our more about who we've been working with and what we've been working on.
Awesome. Patrick, I really enjoyed this conversation. Feels like there was a lot more we could have covered, but alas, we're at time. So thanks so much for making the time to share all of this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, David. I appreciate it.